criminal codes are covered by the Clean Slate Bill, by House Bill 4980. So if you have a possession and deliver or a marijuana manufacture crime, older, it's eventually going to come off through the Clean Slate. And because, of course, it's been a couple years already since we legalized, that clock has already been ticking. So, really just to zero in for a second on the cannabis issues, one of the things I was trying to do was, with the introduction of Senate Bill 416, provide relief that was really more broad, that says, look, it's now legal, and if you were doing anything before that is now legal activity, we're going to automatically wipe it away. What we ended up getting was a bill that basically said if you have a cannabis crime that is older than 7 years for a misdemeanor or older than 10 years for a felony, we're going to automatically wipe those away. But if you have a cannabis crime that is newer than that, you're going to have to apply, and that shall be granted if the crime that you committed was, something that's now legal. And there's a presumption with use and with simple possession that's the case. That's basically where we landed with those.
Can I ask you something? Would a felony, so a person that has a felony drug conviction that is within 10 years, they could apply under this, and if there's it's a new opportunity. There's some discretion for the court to grant it. Or, I understand your point of the misdemeanors as being presumptively set aside, available to set aside. But the felonies under that law, is there some discretion in that if it's within 10 years?
Yeah, so my understanding, if I have this element avenue of it right, we also improved the application element of the law. I didn't mention that because there's just so many tentacles of this. It's hard to mention it all without going on too long. But the House Bill 4980 says you'll automatically get to set aside after 7 years for a misdemeanor, 10 years for a felony without application. But it also says that you have enhanced opportunities to apply. And I don't have my hands on the exact details there, but I believe it's that you can apply with I know you can have more numbers. It's up to 2 felonies in a particular criminal class, and I think 4 misdemeanors, and it also accelerates the time frame that you can apply. I believe now you can apply at 3 years, if I remember correctly from the bill. And so we moved that up, I believe, from 5 to 3.
Okay. Generally speaking, the existing law, you can apply 5 years after, assuming that you don't have more than 1 felony conviction, but you can apply 5 years after the date of the end of the sentence. It's interesting that you've got this the bad night bill, because that's many people have been convicted of multiple felonies from one incident that occurred arising out of one particular day or transaction or occurrence, is the term of art in the law. And I know, for example, David or Alan may have had this conversation with the Oakland County prosecutor, say, well, we got to at least have 2 felony convictions, because they don't want you to be able to come back and...
They don't want the expungement.
As a basis to preclude it, but and it may have arisen out of, and they'll charge that way too. Yeah. They'll charge 2 or 3 felonies and dismiss 1, for the purpose of. So that's interesting that it actually addresses that, and all those convictions in Oakland County that arose out of the same day that people had to, that was all they had, either go to trial or plead. We'll recommend no jail, right, David? That's the other piece of it.
Nice
of what I mean? We'll let you plead as charged to 3 felonies or whatever. Yeah. But that's interesting, because that's been it's been a fundamental strategy of the state in the way that they issue warrants or charges, both for putting more pressure on and more liability if they were to lose a trial, and more work to defend, that result in pleas and whatnot, and also decategorize or disenfranchise them to vote or other types of basic fundamental rights. Interesting, Senator Irwin. Now let me understand a couple of things here. Your bill, that 416, was much broader. That had some legs at the beginning, and oddly, it was met by resistance. I remember we talked about this. Obviously, I think the Michigan State Police was testifying against it. And again, I'm not asking you to name the enemies, but there was some resistance, and it got pushed to the side, and then these other bills were introduced. But there was the Attorney General was one that spoke, I think, against it for various reasons, and also there was. Anyways, these other bills were introduced. Is that somewhat of the timeline of how this thing went and how your bill was? Put on the back burner, I guess?
Yeah, my bill never got a hearing, so no, those folks did not testify against it. I don't know if they would have or wouldn't have. I did have, conversations with our Attorney General. I also know that she testified in the House on these bills, or at least her team did, and expressed some concerns about the way in which the automatic expungement would work. And if I understood her concerns correctly, it was really, her concern was more on behalf of sort of how it would actually functionally work, and particularly with, some, if I understand it correctly, pleas that were happening at the local level that were less than 93-day, that were 90-day misdemeanors, and that maybe those wouldn't be properly expunged through this, and that, at least if we do it by application, then the individual knows that their record is cleared, rather than having some sort of situation where people are told in the media that their record is automatically, and then they go and apply for a job, but it turns out that the district court is still reporting that to the background check agency. That's kind of how I understood her concerns. And from my understanding, those concerns were addressed with some amendments in the House, and it's part of the reason why 4982 was changed the way it was. But no, my bill wasn't actually heard in the Senate. And, what really happened was that even though I was trying to get my bill heard in the Senate, the energy just started on the House side for whatever reasons that I'm not privy to And so the bill started on the House side, and I really wish we would have done more to improve these, particularly for a couple groups of people. I mean, I think the folks who were really left out of this were, one, individuals who were caught up in a PWID charge, who really just, were Costco shoppers and had a little bit more than the police thought that they should have. And they ended up getting, dragged a little bit deeper into the vortex than they should have for that reason, or because they just didn't want to roll on their friends. So that's kind of one group of people who I think really got the short end in this deal. And, get some relief from this package in the end, but they might have to wait for that, and that's not right. And the other folks that we were really trying to, I think, get written into this that didn't get written in were some of those caregivers and folks who opened up compassion centers or dispensaries during the period in which, we had this gray situation with the law. And some communities really cracked down hard on those folks and really, threw the book at them in ways that really don't support the public interest. And I was hoping to find some sort of way to get something in there that would provide relief to those folks as well.
I would agree. It's kind of wait a second, David. I would agree. I think it's distressing that there is a whole category of individuals who, became patients or caregivers, relying on the protections that they thought were afforded to them by the MMA, to which they learned it did not. And it wasn't because there was some clear statement that told them otherwise. There was clearly debate and discussion, and they learned about it by being brought into court and having the court decide without any real fair notice. And this is seen over and over and over again. I can name these issues: the closed lock facility, the usable marijuana, someone cuts down a couple plants and it weighs 10 pounds, and they put it in a bag and weigh it, and you're way out of compliance, and no one's even considering the concept of usable marijuana. I mean, there's various plays in that. There's a whole category of people that were technical violators of the MMA. You know what I mean? Much different than some of these other convictions. The other one, which was an easy category to clean up, and I don't know exactly how you could identify them, but in the legislature, when you were in the House, I think you passed the amendment to Section 4 that applied retroactively and reclassified the weights of what and forms by which patients or caregivers could possess cannabis, that being liquids and solids,
gaseous.
but
gaseous.
And gases, whatever that is. But it applied retroactively, which is something I'd never seen in 26 years at the time.
That would be a dilemma.
A law that applied retroactive, never seen it before, and it was intended to be curative, if I'm correct in the specific language. But again, that was a category that's easy. It seemed to be an easy one that you kind of pick out there. Let me ask you this question. I know I don't want to get too much into the minutia and the weeds here, but so you have the bad night law. We're calling it. Was that 4985 or 5120? All right. So let's say someone has 3 felonies from this particular day.
Oops.
Well,
that was a really bad.
Well, let's say
it happens.
It happens. They raid the place. They have
that's
too many
a bad
plants.
day.
They got some, weight hanging, trees hanging, or whatever.
Jeez,
and they charge them with a PWIT, a manufacturing,
maintaining a
drug house,
maybe a felony firearm. If
maybe
they got,
even a CCE. We don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
who knows?
Who knows? One day, Anyways, so this happens. Let's say someone gets convicted of 3 felonies. And it's not outside of 10 years. Now, they would normally be precluded from this, but does the bad night amend, this law as it passes, does that give them, there's nothing else that said 3 felonies are precluded right now from getting expungement. Does the bad night law allow them now to get expungement independent of how long it has been? Or what's the cap on the time?
It allows them to apply, yes. It reduces their numbers of felonies or misdemeanors for the purposes of getting under the limits to apply.
I see. So you're saying like if there's 3 convictions, that would count as 1 conviction or something to that effect?
Yeah, that's how it's been represented to me. Now I'm not an attorney and I don't practice, so I don't know how exactly judges are going to handle this, how prosecutors. And to your point earlier about the behavior of prosecutors and how that dance plays out with defense attorneys, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how all of this plays into all of that. But my understanding of it is yes. If you have in a situation where someone gets a delivery charge, a manufacturer charge, and a felony firearm, and maintaining a drug house, all from the same incident, then that's going to be considered one for the purposes of making your application to the court, going to the judge and saying, hey, judge, here, I made this mistake, but now here's what I've done in the years, and here's why I should get this off my record.
Now, if there's no felony firearm, they have 3 marijuana cases, and it's more than 10 years old, there's an automatic, do they have to apply?
Yep, that's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
If you have more than 10 years, and it's not a... It's not a crime that carries a life charge. It's not an assaultive crime. There's a long list of those. Not all of them are really all that assaultive. But anyway, if it doesn't fall into those exceptions, then yes.
Right. Right. Okay. That's fine. And I'm just saying that here you got 3 marijuana charges more than 10 years ago. That seems to be a category that, like we said before, would not normally be able to be expunged, but after 10 years, automatically. Now the next
10 years clean. Is that correct? They have to have 10 years with no crime.
Oh, is that what
Correct.
it is? Okay,
Exactly.
I was going to say.
That's a key detail. That's a key detail, and the whole that's a crucial detail that Mr. Rudoi brought up.
Here's the question. Let's say that
10 years, if you have a felony, even if you have multiple cannabis felonies, you go 10 years without reoffending, then you have access to this clean slate opportunity. But if you do reoffend, then that is going to start the clock over.
How about this? 15 years ago, someone gets 3 felonies. 14 years ago, 3 felonies. 13 years ago, 3 felonies, and then go clean for the next 12 years. Could we go back and get rid of the 3, 3, and 3 those years past, if it's all marijuana or not assault?
Yeah, I think so. I've never heard any total limit in there. I didn't see anything like that, and so that specific example didn't come up in committee or the discussion. But my understanding is yes, as long as you go 10 years without reoffending. If you get back on track and stay on track for 10 years, then you can get your record cleared. And that really lines up with research that we looked into, from around the country that showed that, if somebody has gone 10 years without reoffending, they're less likely to offend again than someone who's never been caught.
I mean, it's an amazing bill. You told me about that bill at episode 400 of Planet Green Trees that you guys were working on it. And I think it really is, it gives people a chance to restart their lives even when they have a whole bunch of felonies. You stay on the right track for 10 years and automatically you don't need a lawyer to help you. It's gone.
I'm curious, Rep. Irwin, in coming to this conclusion, I'm sorry, Senator Irwin, sorry. Will you tell us a little bit about how Michigan compares to other states in this regard? If you have a felony, is it with you forever? I mean, other states do that because that is really penal. Is there a 10-year, 15-year gap in other states that they recognize? Number one, and number two. As a matter of course, there's been several amendments and fixes to the expungement bill over the last 5 or 7 years that still leave us with, if you have more than one felony, compare prior to these bills being introduced where Michigan, expungement law compared with other states as well, if you can understand any of those two questions.
My understanding is that before these changes, the current law, Michigan is one of the most restrictive states. And, I think as soon as the governor's pen lifts from this bill, in this package of bills, Michigan will be one of the most progressive states, one of the states where it's relatively easier to get your record cleared. I haven't done a clear survey of everything, but I know that at the beginning of this process, I looked at some research that I think Pew had done that, showed us kind of at the most restrictive end. And that makes sense. Michigan basically drank all of the get tough on crime Kool-Aid in the 90s. We did everything that everybody did. We took all the bad ideas and enacted all of them in our state. And so we're still living with that hangover.
Interesting. Does any of it include language of the right, restoring rights to vote or rights to restore their Second Amendment, firearm rights? Were any of those things addressed?
There's nothing in any of these bills that address any of that. But of course, here in Michigan, you are incarcerated. If you're in prison, you can't vote. But if you're out of prison, even if you're on parole, even if you have a mountain of felonies, you are eligible to vote in Michigan. So felons can vote in Michigan as long as you are not locked down.
Okay. And so they're passed and they're going to go through. Okay, now explain for us this, and I don't know how much time you have, and we've got a judge that may want to get on here in a minute here, but explain to us what we should be worried about, if anything, for this lame duck session that's upcoming. Is there a lot of activity, colleagues of yours that have asked for your support and some bills that they think may come up for a vote? And I'm asking more specifically about cannabis bills regarding the MMMA or the recreational law. There's been talk, and Jamie Lowell, who's on the Zoom also, was preaching brimstone and fire and fear of what we should be expecting in the lame duck sessions. Is there any truth to that, or should we believe Jamie Lowell?
Well, I think that Jamie's always worth listening to, and I was going to say that there's a few things going on in the lame duck period that are worth paying attention to. I think pretty much every time I've come on your show for the last, ever since Proposal 1 passed, I've talked about how we need to protect Proposal 1. And the time to do that, the very best to do that is right now, because there are people running for state house. It's right before an election. All the politicians are listening. They want your vote. And so ask them what they're going to do. Are they going to protect Proposal 1? Do they believe in the rights that the citizens passed in Proposal 1? And, I think what's most likely to get tinkered with, and if you're concerned about these things, you should ask your politicians questions about them. And the things that are most likely to get tinkered with are the rules around the business side of things. Things like, how do you get a license and what does a license entitle you to? And so there's going to be a lot of fights I think, between the different folks that are in, different places and have different interests within the business space regarding cannabis. And then I also think that there's constantly an effort, a push, a desire to increase the taxation on cannabis. And I think that politicians from both sides need to hear, at least this is my message that I've been trying to spread to everyone in Lansing, is that we set the tax at this rate for a reason. We don't want the legal operators to have such an outrageously expensive price that they can't compete at all. And we don't want to make this so it's an unsuccessful transition. And so why don't we keep the tax at this reasonable rate? We'll raise a reasonable amount of money for schools and roads and local governments. But if we jack it up too high, we're going to experience the same problems that states that have extremely high tax on cannabis experience, which is an even greater participation in the illicit market and an even lower percentage of transactions that are tested and taxed. So I think that's something that people need to hear, and I think that there is going to be there are efforts always to amend the acts. In addition to that, I would say that there are also, big opportunities this November to elect pro-cannabis candidates and to elect candidates that are going to move the ball forward on our issues. And, since you've given me the opportunity, I'm going to encourage everybody to vote for Joe Biden. I'm going to encourage everybody to vote for Gary Peters. If we want to change the national dynamic, if we want to have a Justice Department that's going to allow the market to flourish here in Michigan, and if we're going to have a sensible respectable government that doesn't make us cringe when we listen to the leader speak. We need to make some change. So, that's my message. I can go deeper into the politics of all that if you really want, but I suspect that everybody on this, everyone who's listening to this is going to vote, and I hope that you vote. For candidates that are going to move it forward. But most of all, I hope you ask the candidates about these issues, because just making them deal with it is a huge part of what we need to be doing for progress on these issues.
I'm curious about this one thing. I know, since the enactment of MMFLA, a lot of people believe that was the beginning of the end for caregivers. In other words, when they created this new supply market for the retail, the commercial medical marijuana industry, they overlooked the existing caregivers. And at that time, everyone thought that the caregivers were going to be thrown under the bus. Of course, they were the sole source that supplied that market for a certain period of time. Are you getting a lot of interactions about that? Because that is, and I think also what's newer in this discussion, independent of what I just said, being true or false, you now have an additional group that, in a way, wants to see the caregivers in, and that would be the business community of the medical cannabis world. They likewise may see them as competition now that the market's beginning to, partially stabilize itself. So just on that topic alone, is there a lot of talk about, do you hear that? Do you get approached about this topic? Do you hear other colleagues of yours debating the troubled caregivers or whatever, to the extent that some action may be taken on that?
Not really. I haven't, although I'm glad you brought it up, because, of course, today marks the day where the Marijuana Regulatory Agency has sort of stopped the flow of caregiver product into the market. And, I think that it's probably something that should be talked about. My goal was to, keep caregivers as a part of the system. I think part of the reason why we introduced a sort of very, very small growing license within the rec law was to try to provide an open door for those folks to get into the legal market. But, for a number of reasons, I don't think that's been made a functional door. And so, I very much want to make sure that those folks, have an opportunity to participate. But right now, the way that the state license system has worked is to shut them out. Maybe if there's talk about making changes within this system to try to make it more sensible, that would be a perfect time to raise this conversation again and to say, hey, look, we've got folks here in the state of Michigan who for many, many years have shown that they can provide quality product that patients want. Wouldn't it be sensible to make it easy and make it rational for those folks to participate in a legal market? But as you all know, the way that the MMFLA got passed was not particularly rational. I mean, there was all sorts of breathless nonsense that got shoved into there to satisfy either some special interest or some monsters under the bed concern. And, now we have a situation where, I think some of the folks who are clamoring for change with the MMFLA and clamoring for change with the MRMTA are doing so because the MMFLA creates a system that isn't very functional, and the recreational system, the adult use system, is just much more sensible, much more streamlined. It was just better designed, and so one reason why I think some folks are saying, well, hey, let's fix the medical side so that it works better. Well, I think that's something that a lot of folks would get on board with, but we all know that when those conversations start happening, everybody gets involved, and all sorts of bad ideas are going to come up as well. So I think the best way that we can, I think, positively influence the future of these laws is just to make sure that we build relationships with these elected officials, that we ask them what they're going to do during the campaign, that we then ask them what they're going to do afterwards. We show up for their coffee hours and say, hey, here is the bill that now has gotten introduced in lame duck. What position you can take and why? And finally, building up those relationships with the local officials is really important as well. One of the most important things that is happening or not happening in our state on cannabis law reform is the decision at the local level to either allow or not allow cannabis businesses in their area. One of the other important things that I care about is the development of the industry with respect to social equity. The local units have a tremendous opportunity to involve themselves in that discussion. And, you know, certainly I know as a local citizen, I'm encouraging my local cities to do that, and I would encourage others to do that as well. You know, your townships, your cities should be asked, you know, what are you going to do about this? Are you going to allow these businesses, or do you want it to stay in somebody's basement in the neighborhood? You know, do you want to create a situation where this industry looks like our community, or are you going to create a system where there's a tiny number of licenses up to the highest bidder, you know, which creates the result we know it creates? And so, you know, I'm just hoping for a healthy, pro-consumer, somewhat funky industry here in Michigan that, you know, represents the culture in our state in a positive way.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, it's likely that a bill will pass in a lame duck that forces cities to opt in for recreational. Is that what I'm understanding? Just kidding.
Well, I don't know about that. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to pass anything in lame duck. I think it's going to be very, very difficult. You've got a governor of one party, you've got a legislature of the other party, you know, and, you know, but then again, you know, I do think that this is the kind of issue that isn't super partisan, and so it might be in play in a lame duck environment. So that might be one of many ideas, but I suspect that if there is something that comes forward, it'll have several elements.
I was making a joke that the legislation that would pass would be compelling the cities to opt in for recreational. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. I did want to ask you this one thing, because I know that, and I can let you go after this, but see if you can, because I know you were involved with, and I don't know what your official title was, but you're involved with the MRTMA. I know you were, His
official title was Badass.
Badass involvement, but there's, you know, I've heard political director. I've heard some of the leaders in our community who support the idea of recreation and make some criticism about it, that there's certain areas of it that don't specify penalties. And I, in fact, am disappointed to announce that I have a client that was arrested with marijuana in his trunk, and he was charged with a 7-year felony in the year 2020, which I don't know if that's even a reality of something that could happen. And, of course, it's something we're going to litigate. But is there talk that there's confusion in the recreational law, you know, for individual actors, putting aside the business stuff? Is there confusion that it needs to be amended as to whether it's a misdemeanor or a civil infraction if somebody's smoking outside in public? Or if what the consequences would be beyond a civil infraction if, for example, someone received remuneration when they gave cannabis to somebody else? Or, you know, things to that effect where there is not... Or, for example, did the law intend to allow for the prosecution of individuals under the age of 21 for driving a motor vehicle with any presence in their system? You know, these are still remaining issues that seemingly I am representing people in. But just, you know, is there so much confusion that we need to go to the legislature to fix this? Or are you hearing the need for this? Or are you standing up and saying, listen, I was part of this thing, none of that is true, sit down, no laws need to amend the MRTMA, or something in between? What do you say?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, the 3 different examples you gave, you don't allow me to make such a straightforward statement. But generally, yeah, I mean, my pushback is that this is all covered by MRTMA, and there is going to be some case law that's going to have to shake out, you know, around some of the driving stuff and around some of the stuff around people under 21. But, you know, I think that the language is super clear, and especially when it comes to this point, the first example you raised of someone who is engaging in public consumption. That is clearly a civil infraction. It's right in the statute. I mean, I can't remember exactly the citation off the top of my head, but what I do remember is that when this issue came up last year, because of some folks that I think were prosecuting attorneys and were trying to sort of question this, or maybe city attorneys who were questioning, well, gosh, you know, how do we figure this out? I mean, I remember just cutting and pasting the obvious language from the law that says that this is a civil infraction. Public use is a civil infraction, period. Right, so that on that point, I'm very clear and pushing back in exactly the way you suggested. When it comes to somebody who is receiving remuneration for a gift, well, that sounds to me like we're no longer talking about a non-business transaction. That sounds to me like we're talking about someone who really is running a business that's unlicensed and just wants to use the gifting opportunities of the fig leaf for their unlicensed business operations. But then again, I don't know. There's always facts and circumstances. That's why you have to litigate. And then with respect to the young people in the driving, I don't know. I'd have to look at how those sections intersect again to have a really strong opinion on it. But, I feel like Proposal 1 has taken some slings and arrows from folks who say that it wasn't, expertly written, but it's pretty darn good. And it's working just fine. And, all of the hue and cry about, what are we going to do after it's legalized has now been shown to be just complete nonsense.
Yes. People, nobody talks about that. Nobody's talking about that. There has been no impact. Like, kids aren't eating dogs. The sky isn't falling. People aren't being born with 5 eyes. None of that's happening. So, yes. And it's not talked about enough. And there's still nonsense. Anyways, did I not ask you a good question? What's a good question I should have asked you as a final?
Well, I don't know. But, I hope you're all having a great evening. This is a perfect time for me to kind of land the plane and go put the kids to bed. But, I just want to reiterate that, right now is the perfect time to be calling your state house candidates. Right now is the perfect time to be building a relationship with those folks who are running for office in your local area. And, we've made so much progress on these issues over the time that, we have been talking about these issues on Planet Green Trees. And I just want to make sure that we keep making that progress. I think that the way that we make it in the future is the same way we've always made it, which is to talk about these issues openly, to build relationships around the truth of, what, cannabis is and what cannabis users do, and to try to just blow away some of the lies and the myths that have, they still continue to float around places like the Capitol, and certainly tend to float around places like city halls and township halls. I mean, I don't think it's lost on anybody in this group, but the attitudes around these issues are very generational. And I'm 43, so I'm not young by any means. But most of the folks who are holding positions like mayor and city councilor and township supervisor and things like that, or state legislator are a fair amount older. Their attitudes about cannabis tend to be 20 years later than mine. And so, depending upon where you're at on that spectrum, that might give you an extra opportunity to build relationships with them, or it might give you an extra opportunity to see kind of where they're coming from. But, that's kind of part of what we're up against, is that the public is way ahead of the politicians on these issues because of that generational divide. And if we continue to speak out on these issues, then that wind at our back is going to continue to work for us.
Well said. I want to thank you very much for joining us. You're always very informative, and promise you'll come back again. We can talk about how we're gonna do some of that with treating the plant differently and talk about it differently and change some of these objectives, and especially with the children and how the conduct of parents in a home can do. What are the right protocols as we go forward? If we're really trying to think of cannabis as alcohol, in relation to alcohol, in getting over some of the social barriers. Not now. Promise you'll come back. We don't have to talk about that, but just listen. Thank you very much for us, and have a great night. And go tuck the kids in.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Here.
All right. So I don't want to dilly-dally here because I have a judge. We have a judge on the show. Do we have time to just keep going?
We got time. Let's go.
Is Rudoi staying on as well?
Roll tape.
Did he walk home? Okay, he may have left.
He's
all right.
walking
Fine.
right now.
All right, I want to welcome.
I'm here.
Okay,
there
you're here.
you
All
are.
right.
I'm here.
I'm not ignoring you and your story about your kids. We're not going to talk about it for a second because I want to talk about my story and have input from my friend and Judge Ted Metry. First of all, welcome my friend Ted Metry, lawyer and a judge. Very unique position to have in the state of Michigan. I think there's only one or two that retain that title. Maybe we'll let him explain how he has a unique situation. But Ted and I go way back with the law school together, and been good friends ever since. We've played, we've done a lot of crazy. Ted, welcome to the show. First of all, not the
Thank
first.
you, Michael. Nice to see you. Good to see the guitars back there, like our old days.
Right, they are not played well, but they are in sight. First of all, explain. You're currently sitting judge in the Grosse Pointe, 3 of the district courts there. Explain how that happened and who you had to convince to get that position.
Who I had to convince. Well, let's start. It's a municipal court. The Grosse Pointes are the only municipal courts still in the state of Michigan, and I am the elected judge of Grosse Pointe Woods, and I'm in my 10th year. And I am one of 4 judges in Grosse Pointe who have we still allowed to practice law and sit as a judge. So our municipal courts on the criminal side are just like the district courts, from search warrants to arraignments to misdemeanors and felony exams.
And how many
civil dockets? Civil dockets a bit different.
How many days a week do you sit in that court?
I have basically one day a week I sit, but no magistrates, no one else. I'm signing search warrants, get woke up in the middle of the night, and under the new laws, I'm going in and arraigning people on a regular basis. Although the last few months has been by Zoom.
Interesting. And have there been situations where, as a practicing attorney and being a judge, that there's been a situation where conflicts ever come up and you've had a, either disqualify?
Yeah, I've had conflicts. Clients of mine have been arrested in my jurisdiction.
Sure, I can imagine. Right, of course. No.
I got elected in Grosse Pointe, so I grew up here. I know a lot of people in the area, and so a fair amount of business from here. Yeah, I've had that. I've had, people always talk about conflict. Well, lawyers know judges, so I have never really found a conflict there in that sense. But yes, you recuse yourself. You just do the smart thing. Nothing else you can do.
And that's the thing. It's an interesting about lawyers, judges in the world we live in. When an ethical dilemma comes up, there's usually one right choice to do, right? And that's what you do. It's the path's already kind of told for you. You don't have to wallow in ethical dilemma. You know what I mean? So we've been given kind of taken an oath to follow those rules. All right. So one of the reasons, we got thousands of things I could ask you about. I don't want to ask you about any specific case, and I'm going to ask you to give your opinion on anything, but I had interacted with you and told you the story about this monumental event that happened in my life. I told David Rudoi about it as well. I think both of you had the same reaction, which was first the response was wow. And I want to talk a little bit about it. Ted, of course, you were a lawyer during this period of time in this event I am going to describe, and know all the players, and we're running around like I was running around back then in this area. And so let me back it up a little bit and explain it. And I want to hear your thoughts as a judge and David Rudoi. And of course, listen, Judge Metry, Alan Pizer, also a lawyer on. He's got the Komorn Law, and David Rudoi's picture's not on there. Everyone else is, and Alyssa McCormick, of course, who was an attorney in my office, and a beast of a lawyer.
Good afternoon, Judge Metry. It's nice. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you again.
I don't mean to discriminate against non-lawyers, but of course we have Amanda Joslin and also Jim Powers and Jamie Lowell, if I didn't miss him. All right, so the story I want to tell is kind of a unique story for a lot of reasons, but it begins with this trial that I had. I had a client who had been charged with first-degree murder. Actually, he's charged with 2 first-degree murders, separate instances. And
it's one of those bad nights we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's a bad night. That's a bad night for sure.
We can have some humor about it. I have no problem with that.
Now you can have humor.
Of course.
19 years later, you can have humor when he's getting out.
Right.
So what's unique about this case is I think the crime occurred sometime in maybe the year 2000, but it came up for trial in October of 2001. And this, of course, was 1 month after 9/11. And, to other lawyers that are out there, or David, I know you were probably in diapers at the time. Allie, I don't even, but some people, but the idea of having a jury trial in this environment, if people remember, it was this very scary time in the United States. There was, people were pissed off and angry. Yeah. They wanted to trust the government, a little afraid maybe. And it was just a completely different, time to try the case. Like, for example, right now, trying a case may be completely different because you may get, there's so much adversity and discussion about, criminal law, reform, justice, and police, blah, 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 blah. But this was the opposite. It was like almost a time that there was like a urging of a need for government to be, forthright, honest, and protective in a way. That's how I felt anyway.
I also, Michael, not to cut you off, everyone wanted the government to be strong and to take care of business and out wrongdoers.
Yep, that's right.
There was something that was just, it did not, I looked at the jury, no one was happy to be there.
Yeah.
It was only a month afterwards. We still, there's still the, plausible idea that more may be coming. People are still walking on eggshells. Nobody really knew. First began the super security and stuff, getting into all that stuff.
Yeah,
So that was that was the environment of the jury selection and the jury that we had. Now,
and I mean, where was this trial held?
It was in Wayne County. That's an important point. It was in Wayne County Circuit Court in what is now known as it used to be called Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. Now it's the Wayne County Circuit Court Criminal Division, Recorder's Court, Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. Anyways, it's over on St. Alban. Is that what the street is on?
St. Antoine.
St. Antoine and Gratiot. Yep. Those are the streets. Across from 36th District Court. In fact, back then, we used to call the thing called the Gratiot Shuffle. We'd run over to 36th District Court, do some exams, run back and forth, and handle your payments in the afternoon.
Grab lunch.
Hopefully they'd be waiting for you, and you'd have to go back over to 36th District Court and finish your exam. But it was, I didn't have a Fitbit at the time, but I certainly put in the steps, I remember. It was physical. It was actually a physical element about it. There was, I have to say. Anyways, so I tried this case, and interesting, the prosecutor at the time, who is Mike Wagner, who was now a judge in 36th District Court. And interesting fact is that Mike Cox, who became the Attorney General, was the head of the homicide unit of Wayne County at the time. Anyway, so what happened in this trial was, this is a funny fact for the lawyers. I don't know, for a reason I probably wouldn't do it now, but they just discuss reasonable doubt as being a very, very high threshold. It doesn't have a numeric value, but it's somewhere between like 90, 93%, something like that, of proof. Government's got to prove it. Defendant doesn't have to prove anything. It's a high number. It's not like 50%, like preponderance. It's way up there, right? So the case was an identification case as it related to my client. And the witness who didn't hear this, the only witness relative to my client, said he was about 90% certain that it was my guy, okay? So, of course, just to kind of fast forward, in the closing argument, Mike Wagner was arguing, see, even the defense counsel said 90% is beyond a reasonable doubt. And him and I still laugh about this when I run into him. Like, we both, it's something that's so crazy and bizarre. But of the other things that happened in this case, which are kind of interesting, were there was a third defendant who had taken a polygraph, and they agreed to dismiss him out of the case. But while the case was going on, he wasn't dismissed. He was still on the case. He wasn't being brought over with us, and we couldn't call him as a witness to the trial. That was one issue. Another issue was in the process of when my client and the co-defendant were brought over in the transport, unbeknownst to them, there was a person that was there that purportedly overheard a conversation being made by the co-defendant, not my client. And they called this witness who got on the stand and said, the co-defendant of Komorn's client said blah, 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 guilty, guilty, guilty stuff. And he also said bad stuff about Komorn's client, guilty, guilty, guilty stuff. Now, I'm objecting because I can't cross-examine the defendant, the co-defendant sitting next to me. He's got a right to remain silent. So it's a confrontation issue that went on at the time. But nevertheless, it involved the story of the first-degree murder was this house had been broken into. And and I think it was known by everybody that was, and I want to come back to that in a second, and there was somebody that was taking care of the house, and the person that was the owner of the house got chased down and shot back trying to flee the house. The person that was in the house that was keeping the house was a witness and was beginning to try to identify. Of course, everyone was masked and whatever, so it was a very challenging case in that regard. Now, the time frame of this also is interesting, Ted, because when I got the information of the news I wanted to discuss, I was reminded of a number of different things that are drastically different. Number one is, the late 90s, early 2000s, Detroit was witnessing 700 murders every year, something like that, 750, 650, 700. Do you remember that time frame?
Yes.
All right. This is the era of, and I don't know, the era of rap was at its gangster rap was a thing. There was like the L.A. gangs,
Biggie Smalls.
the drive-by shootings. It was playing out like these stories that of the things that were taken on the streets were becoming art, and whatnot. And I'm not judging. I'm just saying it was so prevalent at the time that it was shocking, and then became like kind of the norm. So it is that kind of context that this is taking place, and it's kind of interesting. 700 murders. I don't know where that stood nationally, but I think Detroit said like 300 per year, something like that. But there's something to be said about that, just to kind of draw a distinction of what's been going on. But I remember having cases of drive-bys or people.
It was bad in the 90s.
It was bad in the 90s and early 2000s. Of course, it was all driven by the war on drugs.
Of course, it was
crack issues, which
heroin.
Which the war on drugs, I would argue, produces violence and produces no results. But nevertheless, it was that time frame where these kind of things were taking place. And what it sounded like was some people broke into this dope house trying to rob and steal the dope and the money, and didn't expect the fines or whatever. And anyways, so I try the case. These significant events take place in it, and the judge who sat on the case, who subsequently retired and does some mediation, came out after the case had been submitted to the jury. And he's a friendly guy. I don't know if I cared for his rulings during the case, but he was always trying to be friendly to lawyers, and said, I predict that Komorn's guy is going to get not guilty, and the co-defendant's going to get murdered too. Sure enough, the jury came back with murder in the first degree for both defendants. The sentence for this kind of charge is life in prison. There's nothing you can do about it. We don't have the death penalty in Michigan, but so his other case, and only because of that, because that other case was equally weak in terms of identification and whatnot, we went and pled guilty to murder 2, and they ran the case consecutive with the other case. Now, so from a lawyer's perspective, and let me just explain this for a minute. I hope no one on this call ever goes through that, or has to go through that, or has gone through that, because it really there's a lot of reactions as a lawyer, as a human being, that have. Number one is there's this overwhelming guilt you carry with you that someone that was relying on you to try to win a case didn't work out, and they're now spending the rest of their life in prison. That's challenging fact. It's not the kind of thing you can just walk away from that. You have to really examine yourself, and you really have to examine yourself if you're the type of person who can take that case, give it everything you can, and be prepared to lose, because that's a reality, and it's not for everybody. And I never had an issue with my client, by the way. My client, I could tell you a number of different times where I had interactions with him. He likes me, and in fact, I talked to him today, and I'll explain that a little bit more. He never questioned my commitment to trying and doing all that I could. There was never a question. And he was aware, obviously, and I made a record. In fact, 10 years after his conviction, I got a call from a federal attorney who was representing him, and a federal judge had made a habeas corpus ruling that his confrontation rights had actually been violated on this jailhouse snitch testifying. All right. So I moved on, and the only other point I want to make to the young lawyers or the old lawyers that care is that, this kind of result, as we all know, David, you've won cases, you've lost cases, Alan, you too. Judge Metry is a lawyer, we all have, questions makes you question yourself.
I get reversed once in a while, so I lose them too.
I'm talking about when you're a lawyer and you lost cases. That happened too. I know. But you don't question yourself, but you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. Did I not pick the right profession? Maybe I should. But whatever it is, it's really from a lawyer's perspective, it challenges you. Like all things in life, it's getting knocked down, and you got to get back up. You got to brush stuff off. You got to move on. And whatever it was that I did at that time to convince myself to move on became part of my DNA. It may have been a good thing in a way. It made me maybe a better lawyer at the time, or learn whatever. Not in the grand scheme for my client, but saying it was a moment in my life that I remember today, and there was events that happened afterwards that still, 21 years ago, you can't say you have the same intimate memory of some of these things from that long ago. Nevertheless, so I'm saying all this because the facts are the facts. He was doing life in prison, and that would be after he finished his first 20 years on the murder too. So on Monday this week, I got a call from something that I didn't fully understand, but it was the office of Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. They have a federally funded, maybe state-funded office that is called the Conviction Integrity Unit. which what they do is they're investigating claims made by people who have been convicted by the very same office. And they claim their innocence. They will investigate the veracity of the conviction. They are looking to see if the conviction has integrity. Now, this is a remarkable thing in my mind, and I'm going to stop talking a second and get some comments from the other lawyers and anyone that wants to jump in here. But it's remarkable because, number one, you have to understand this is the same prosecutor's office that achieved the conviction, is now going back and vetting the conviction that their same office did. That, to me, is insane in a way. I mean, it's insane in the context of where we exist.
I can't believe it works.
In the criminal justice system. That's number one. Number two is what I learned, and this is more of a personal response, is that there was a number of fundamental inculpatory pieces of evidence that were never turned over. That the lawyers that worked on the case, and talking about, I spoke to the lawyers from the prosecutor's office that are in this unit. They worked on the case, they told me, for a year and a half. Like, you don't get the combination of that. It's very rare do lawyers work on a case at all for a year and a half, especially a prosecutor. And they investigated, they had defense lawyers that were now prosecutors, they had appellate lawyers, they had retired homicide detectives, and they really, really tracked down and worked hard on the case. What they learned was that there was a number of different bits of information that were not turned over to me. As I mentioned, this witness, this third witness, passed the original defendant, passed the polygraph. I should, they agreed I should have been able to call that person as a witness. I was prevented from doing it. At no time did they ever point any blame on Mike Wagner. I want to be clear about that, the prosecutor. These things took place without his knowledge. But they found within the investigators' file all of these notes that they tracked down that were not turned over and would have been inculpatory. So, at the end of the day, after all this investigating in this group, they had recommended to Kim Worthy that they vacate the sentence, and they called me to tell me that she'd agreed, and that this murder conviction from 20 years ago was going to be set aside. The conviction set aside, his record for this conviction set aside as if it never happened. And, so all of that, kind of undid whatever soot and soil had grown on top of whatever reasons I convinced myself to keep going on. It really stirred all that up again. I kind of had a carved out, and I was just like, I joked with everyone here. You know how you feel after a trial, Ted, Allie, David, Alan, you did everything you could, you strategized as you could, you presented your case as you could, and you lost the case. It's like the Jack Nicklaus when he walks up the green on number 18, the reporter says, "Mr. Nicklaus, why didn't you make the putt?" He says, "I did, I hit it where I wanted to, it just didn't go in." That kind of situation. So we've all been there before, but it turns out afterwards that, there was cheating that was going on, and it was interesting because their reflection on the case, they could tell that I knew things that needed to be, brought out, and they were nice and they complimented me of how hard I was fighting for my client, etc. So I had this entire different undoing of settled issues that I've had to deal with as a professional, and all positive. But let me stop my ranting for a second. Judge Metry, what is your take on this? What are your you know all the players, have sat in judgment of other people and practiced as a lawyer. What's your take on the whole grand scheme of this?
Well, let me first tell you that what that call does for you, Michael, is justify what you did for your client in that trial at that time, and the lawyer you were and the lawyer you are, because I know that he got the best out of you, and if you got a fair trial, that best would have resulted in a not guilty verdict as opposed to 20 years of his life being taken. So it does stir up a lot of stuff, and I can't imagine what it stirred up within you, because I know how your conviction and your position for you as an attorney. What I will say is that it really, really surprises me when I go into courts, because I still practice, and I see judges and how they speak to a defendant and what they do to a defendant in ruling. Because I just wonder, have they lost their humanity, or have they just lost what it's like to practice law? I'm yelling at attorneys who are yet late, blowing their tops at defendants who really haven't broken the law to a certain huge extent, and I just see that judges have their perceived prejudices come out, and they don't know what's happening. I also, that's what I try to think about when I'm on the bench. I cannot know anything about this case before, and I'm not gonna have a feeling one way or another. It's got to be fair. You got to give everybody an opportunity, and I see that happening.
The system's not perfect. Obviously, it's better than any other system that's been created. We can all, most of us could probably agree on that, right? I mean, in terms of, and I do,
I would agree.
And I do think there is something to be said about, like, if this was Russia, there's no setting aside convictions, or you're not going to find a place that this kind of thing could actually happen. It's terrible to think about 21 years. Like the other guy, the co-defendant got convicted. His guy said he didn't have a second case. He's sitting in jail, lost 20 years. He may actually have some, there may be some damages that he can collect. But that still doesn't bring back 20 years of your life sitting in jail. Now, there's a joy that the error was corrected and rectified. But again, how do you really? Who knows what who nobody would want to be a fly on the wall for those 20 years for my client. But with all that being said, there's some optimism that we can draw from this, I guess, in a way that justice was had in the end. But I want to say that the phenomenon to me is that a prosecutor's office has within its own paid employees a unit that arguably is mandated to criticize, judge, and vet the work of the colleagues that surround them. The explanation.
Michael, was that unit born out of what was going on down there with some police officers? I think that's what it was out of, and that has started a run of some things that Prosecutor Worthy has done, and all done for the better of all of Wayne County.
Well, to me, I don't practice like I used to for the first 10 or 15 years, 10, 12 years of my practice. I've been less there. I have had cases over the years in Wayne County, but not like I was there before. And I go all over the state, and I go in different courts and places and what like that. And I don't know that, Frank Murphy is a unique place. There's no question about it. But criminal justice is the same across the state of Michigan. And I what do you think? I mean, is there an argument to be had that every prosecutor's office should have a conviction integrity unit, Judge Metry?
You certainly can make that argument. I mean, I just don't think you see the number of the near vast quantity of cases elsewhere. I was up recently in a matter in West Branch. I mean, there's a prosecutor and there's an assistant prosecutor. So clearly, up there, they don't have nearly the amount of cases. So how are they going to have an integrity unit when they only have two prosecutors to begin with? I think the integrity unit there is there's not as much crime, and so they can look at each case and spend a lot more time on them. But yeah, in larger areas, larger counties, yes, 100%.
Well, let me ask you this. First, was it Brendan Curran up there? Is that who you were dealing with?
No, it was LaDonna Schultz. I think she went to law school with us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. So let me ask you this. So just because, so you're saying, I would agree, and obviously our practice, Macomb and Wayne County, Elgin County, three largest, and maybe Genesee, 4 largest counties in the state, and have a lot more customers or, business felonies, et cetera, going through those court systems, and probably make up larger proportion of the type of activity. But you go out, there's other counties that have a lot of crime. They may not be at the same scale. They may have fewer prosecutors. But if there's X amount of convictions in Wayne County that have no integrity. I'm saying integrity, not integrity, like Integrity Farm, South Park. Integrity.
Integrity law.
Then there's certainly a proportion that could, there's an equal proportion based upon the total number of, cases that they might have, criminal cases, one could argue, right? I mean, if Wayne County's got X amount, first of all, that's X amount too many, right? And I understand your point, Ted, that there's smaller communities, but the point that I like of this is that they have this independent unit that is not socializing with the rest of the group, that they're there kind of carved off, kind of check and balance of the prosecutor's office. In fact,
yeah, and quite frankly, it's probably all financial. That they got a grant for it and they're able to do it, and if they don't have that grant, they're not able to do it.
That's a good point, and I don't want to. We chatted a little bit yesterday about the. You can say this is off limits if you want, but we chatted a little bit about the court funding report, etc. Now, I was not accusing the municipalities of anything bad. I don't want to try to lump.
No, I'm not good.
But you mentioned something about the funding. Just the funding, how that's lacking for the purpose of integrity. I get that, but it also reflects a little bit that there's some. Funding issues. Funding is always an issue for the management and administration of the courts. It costs money. You open up a courtroom, it's going to cost X amount of, right? You got X amount of judges. The state budget pays for that, and the local cities and district courts are funded locally. And there's been, so you had a position on that. I know you may. Defensive a little bit because of the court that you work in does not follow that kind of nefarious assessment of things, and there's no bias. But is that something that's talked about amongst the other judges? Have you ever heard other judges complaining about that, like they made it appear in that article or the trial in the commission report?
The people I've spoken to, they tend to agree with me. They just didn't think that they were finding people to finance their court. I guess after we talked, I spent a little more time thinking about it. And every misdemeanor civil infraction that comes through the district court, there's fine levels, and
some of it goes to the district court, right?
Yeah, but a misdemeanor you can find anywhere from $0 to $500. And so you put somebody who's there on his second driving license suspended, and you find them $250. It's not the full load. You're not trying to crush him, but you get thrown another $125 state fee. Then he's got to pay a $45 clearance fee. Yeah, it adds up, but it's not all. It's one of those are mandatory state things that we have to collect and it has to go on them, and that don't have anything to do with court fines. And so I think if I say $500 plus this, and this, then I'm doing something outrageous, but.
Listen.
The legislation's passed the level.
No, I understand that. I got that, and you have the discretion to say 0 to 500. I don't think it's the question of whether a judge can,
I guess here's my point. I'll say, Michael, if someone's throwing out there $100 to every case that comes through for their building fund, that's an issue.
Well, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this: I'm saying that from those, whether it's $100, $250, or $500, a portion of that money is used for the court budget. And as it goes, I mean, you can tell me if it's similar in your courts, but I imagine somewhere between, 96 to 98% of the cases that come through probably plead guilty in your docket and dockets across. Okay.
And everywhere. But
what I'm saying is, it's that 90% and the reliance on that number of cases coming through, and I'm not saying anyone's doing anything wrong, but if it's $100 or $500, whatever it is, it's those revenues.
I think you're simplifying it by that because my funding unit funds my court. End of story. I don't. I don't get funds. Yeah, sure, that money goes back into the stream, but it goes back into the city. But I don't.
Here's my point.
I've got a budget that's set. I don't.
If somebody,
I guess what are you gonna do? If you're gonna stop. I mean, I don't see the argument to me just isn't there. It's because 70% of our funding is coming from the fines and costs.
No, the argument is this: that the argument is not that judges are abusing the right to fine and punish. I don't think that's the argument. They're doing it as they're supposed to. What they're saying, though, is when they are presiding over a case and the decision to dismiss or the decision to put someone on probation, or the decision to take an action that results in some payment to be made, inherently results in monies going to the budget. And in other words, if they dismiss the case, they lose out on that potential cost. And I'm not saying that it's.
I can tell you that in 10 years on the bench, I've never not dismissed a case, double negative, to see the budget. And it's just, it's not in my makeup. It's not in my DNA. If there's someone doing it, shame on them.
Well, I hear you, and I was not accusing the municipalities.
No, I don't. I don't think
I was, and I'm not even.
I have a hard time. I guess I just have a hard time with it, and I probably shouldn't.
Well, you mentioned how some of the judges don't.
Well, here's my question: do you think Grosse Pointe has?
It's quite a question,
Wait,
David.
yeah.
I didn't hear the question.
He blanked out.
He'll be back.
He'll be
gathering his.
He'll be back.
My
his
question was, listen, Ted, I'm trying to reflect what this report was saying. You know what I mean? I don't even, I'm just like a, the messenger. And
I don't agree with it, but that's fine. I don't have to agree with it.
But there is.
Because I don't know any judge who's kept someone on probation or found them guilty or done something like that for the purposes of court. If they're finding someone guilty, I think in their mind they think they're guilty, or they're putting them on probation, they think that's what they need, or the fine they think is appropriate. I just have never felt that. Probably been practicing law 28 years, so that's what I'll say.
All right. An argument could maybe be made that the description of some of the judges that have lost their, their basic common sense of decency of, that description of that characterization of how, some folks on the bench could be perceived.
Yeah.
Is
sure. I guess I was more how you treat people.
Well,
and I think.
And people become like a dollar that's kind of grinding. It's like hurry up, get in line and pay your money. Hurry up and get like they're not dispensing justice. They're not looking out. And again, it's the business of the criminal defense has become a business a little bit. There's a lot of customers. A lot of laws being made. A lot of tickets being. There's another report, Ted. The governor had asked for a report regarding the overcrowding of prisons in Michigan, and that report came back with, we have too many laws, there's too many tickets being written, people are charging, the police are charging people for stupid, irrelevant tickets, they bring them into court, caught up in a 2-year probation, fines and costs, it double, triples their, and then they're on probation, they violate, they get sent to jail. That's what the problems are. We've got too much
of a legislative problem, Mike. It's not a court problem. The police are there to enforce the laws. They stop a guy and he's got a driver's license suspended. They bring him in because that's what they're charged to do. But that's I read that report that came from Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist.
Well, the point was, they're trying to ascertain why do we have such why is the prisons filled up? And because there's a lot of misdemeanor activity, right? You know what I mean?
Well, and that goes to the bond issue.
The bond issue is another one, right? But there's a lot of people in jail for misdemeanors, right?
No doubt.
And that's what I'm saying. And it may not even be from coming in right out of the game, but other things associated with their case afterwards. And this does nobody any good. And really, the question I thought that was being posed in that report was, not the question, but the conclusions were there are ways. It's not even a legislative thing. It's policy in a way. It's policy. Like, for example, the Michigan State Police and a lot of the sheriffs across, not the Michigan State Police, a lot of sheriffs across the state would say, we're not enforcing the, stay-at-home order. Don't call us. Call the government. Like, how can they do that? How can they choose to decide, that they're not going to enforce the law, call the Attorney General's office? Too confusing for us. You know what I mean? Like, that's not, there's policies and decision-making. Why is there a disproportionate number of blacks and browns in jail for marijuana? Because the laws are the same. They just decided to enforce it in certain neighborhoods, right? Same amount of people use white, black, pink, green, or whatever. I'm saying, so there's a factor of that I think plays into this. I'm not saying it's by design, but certainly as much as the results develop here that are disproportionate, the report says they can give warnings on some of these things, and anyways, I don't know. I'm not criticizing you. Or, this is the system we live in. In a way, it's good for lawyers, but it's also, you could look at a lot of the district courts across the state of Michigan, and they are beautiful buildings in very depressed communities that don't have a lot of, commerce or jobs for that matter. But
Except in Warren.
Except in Warren. But the court buildings are being built because it's a center of business. It's like a place where money's collected, and I don't know. I think it varies from city to city. I don't think your city, Ted, is one that is economically challenged. You've got taxpayers. You've got a good tax base of residents and people that are paying, real estate taxes, et cetera. You go to some of these other parts, for example, White Cloud, Michigan, up there, and I don't know.
It's beautiful up in White Cloud.
There's no
Newaygo County.
There's no nobody work. There's no job in the town unless you work for the law enforcement. That's the only job. There was like a restaurant that had like a couple chefs and a waitress.
I've been to that restaurant.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I swear to God, I have.
delicious?
They have great breakfast.
Usually
really great
They
breakfast.
closed it down. There's no
Country
jobs
ones
in
are
that town.
delicious.
How do they fund that court? They bring people in. Listen, it's different across the state. The one thing that was I found fascinating that Judge Bridget McCormick, no relation to Alyssa McCormick, Justice, was that yes, we are in a one court of justice, Mr. Komorn, but that one court of justice, that yes, they do allow someone in Dearborn, a judge in Dearborn, to sign a search warrant for the Upper Peninsula. That's one court of justice. But each of these courts are independently funded and to get their own funding on their own. There's no centralized. The judges are paid by the centralized state, right? Is that right? That's the only employees that are state funded. Everybody else within the court system would be funded by the local legislative budget. Is that right?
I can't account for them. My municipal courts are different than they are, but it sounds about right.
That was the only point I'm making. Different court. Listen, we can't say that there is not a possibility that judges. One judge in one small court.
Everything's possible,
right?
Mike.
Well, I don't mean it. I don't mean it that way.
Everything's possible.
I'm not cross-examining your witness there. I'm not trying to give you one of those.
Or
but I'm saying
you couldn't cross-examine me.
How many other municipal courts are there in the state of Michigan?
That's a good question.
Only 4 Grosse Pointe courts. That's it.
What's a municipality? Why is tonight different than all other nights? And what's a municipality different than a city?
Well, it's not a municipality different than a city. It's a municipal court different than a district court.
Okay, there you go.
And it's just a part-time court. Like most of them were. East Point was the last part-time court. Municipal courts became a district court judge. Previously at St. Clair Shores back probably in the 70s was a municipal court. It's the whole history behind it I'm not aware of, but I do know that the major difference is in our civil cases, our civil conviction. In the number of cases we have. Clearly, we don't have nearly the amount of cases. Is there a municipal minimum fee for civil cases like $50,000 or $250,000, some kind of? $3,000. Every case is a small claims case. That's the only ones that you guys handle civil. So you don't do anything over $3,000. It's got to be in the. Nothing over $3,000, and that's the unfortunate part of a municipal court. You've got a contractor dispute on your house. It's a $12,000 claim. You can't file in your local court, which everybody else in the state besides Grosse Pointe can. They have to go down to Wayne County to file. Wow. That's not really, to me, full access to justice. Is it true that there's a lot of talk of creating a district court for those various municipal courts out there with Ted first judge? Why is that funny? I see statutes and like lions and stuff. People have been talking about it on and off for years. I don't know if I'll see it in my career. Where can we write to make that happen? Seriously, I think you need to be a district judge. This is a. Call Russ Ethridge. He wants to make it happen. Okay. Did David have a question for me? Yeah, David. Yeah, okay.
He did, but he left.
David, where are you?
Did David leave?
Come on, Rudoi.
I think his phone died.
Text him.
Is a municipal court judge called a judge or a justice?
I'm called a judge, and I was elected.
Okay. You don't have to be a
The only people called justice, by the way, the only people called justice are the Supreme Court justices.
That's right. There's no judges on the Supreme Court and no justice in the courts below.
What was I going to say?
Michael gets justice every time he goes in there.
Yeah. Alan's always coming up with a zinger.
He's got the
More times than.
Do you enjoy being a judge, Judge Ted?
Yeah, you can make changes. At our level, it's like the district court. You could have some young 17, 18, 19-year-old young people in there, and you can actually make a change. And I've had a few. I've had, like everybody else, you would think in a small court that's not that busy. I've had plenty of them. I've seen them go the other way. I've had people OD and die on my probation. It's very.
Let me ask:
from different points.
Are the resources really available to the courts, your court and other courts, that are necessary to really impact? Would more resources make more of an impact in social justice reform?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've seen positives come out of the sobriety and so courts.
Right, because the things that we're talking, you got the one of the steps of criminal justice reform,
health, veterans court,
right? Veterans court, mental health. Well, because really, since the Engler era,
yes,
the treatment of psychiatric, conditions,
horrendous.
there is none, and oftentimes,
100%.
Oftentimes, in fact, I'd like to mention this whenever I can, but during the Proposition 1 campaign, one of the sheriffs from Eaton County, I think, commented that, listen, the Eaton County Sheriff's Department does 5 mental health checks every single day. If you legalize marijuana, it's just going to increase the number of mental health checks that we have to do and cause more. And my response was, that isn't a reason not to vote for recreational marijuana. It's a reason that you shouldn't be doing mental health checks. That's not a job for a sheriff. Like, that's the wrong people doing the wrong job. But that's what our criminal justice system has turned to, right? A lot of the people who are the people that find themselves in the court system? I mean, there are sometimes bad people. There's oftentimes people that are maybe not out there. I don't know. Probably not much different, but they're people that are challenged in terms of their education, challenged because of their social environment that they're growing up in. They're challenged because of their mental health, other health issues related to drugs and whatnot.
Extenuating circumstance.
And the, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, but a lot of people make up the people that are within the criminal justice system, and I don't know. I don't think people come out of the womb thinking, I want to be a gangster, I want to be a killer, I want to be a retail frauder or a trespasser or a driver without license suspended person. But they themselves, and I'm not saying, we have a lot of laws, and I don't know, the bringing people in the court, the blanket that bring people in the court, I think is too broad and encompasses a lot of people that are not doing intentional crimes, but may in fact have, other issues that bring them there. Any thoughts on that, Judge Metry?
Well, I will agree. The mental health is a big problem. It's a tremendous problem. It's top to bottom. You have it, and that's they can't get over what themselves, and they can't get the help they need. And I'd prefer to help someone than punish them. I'll be honest with you. So.
Let me ask you this. I know I talked to another district court judge in Genesee County who is in one. He's I think it was. I don't want to mention one, but it wasn't like it wasn't Flint. It was one of the neighboring outer counties that generally didn't have in their court. A lot of original felony. Origination of.
Yeah.
But after the COVID, Judge Metry, he was exclaiming how their caseload quadrupled.
Yeah, it's horrible.
You know what I mean? Because of domestic violence, drinking issues, crimes related to drinking, and things to that effect. Did the same happen in your municipality?
I did not see that.
Oh,
It seemed like no one was out doing anything.
well, that's interesting.
At least we're not busy.
Judge Metry, what happened with David Rudoi was he lost his internet connection when he wanted to ask you that question. But I was able to text him and get his questions from him. And his questions basically was going back to before what we were talking about with court funding and whether that creates a bias. And he was asking, what about other courts that have no funding? Wouldn't that create a bias, number one, towards signing search warrants or towards finding a guilt for fines or towards sentencing people on probation? Doesn't at least create an appearance of impropriety if their funding is affected by it?
Well, Michael's kind of alluded to that, and I don't know any jurisdictions that don't have funding because their courts are up and running and the people are being paid. So if it's lack of funding or less than other things or more, they would prefer to have more. I can't comment on what they're doing in their courts because I'm not there, but I would certainly wouldn't. Certainly would hope it's not happening.
Okay.
Is it true?
Let's be honest. I mean, it's pretty standard across the state of Michigan. If someone gets a drunk driving first offense, they're going to do some probation, and they're going to pay for a probation oversight fee, and they're going to take a class. Now, if someone thinks that they got 18 months probation and the probations are $100 a month, and it really should be about 12 months at $40 a month, those maybe are puffing their things. But I can't comment directly on anything. I'm just making a general observation.
And I think, I think the question that would be being asked would be framed more or less like if that defendant in the first offense had a .07 and weak field sobriety tests, and no bad driving, and a lawyer brought a motion to dismiss or suppress the blood that was taken later because there was cause to arrest. It's at that time that the question of whether those funds for the conviction.
Honest, Mike, I'm going to say this and end with this. I think judges are more scared to kick the case, not for funding, but for what the repercussions from outside groups will be.
Understood.
In a case like that.
Sure,
but
I got it.
There could be like a weak search and seizure case where they didn't have the probable cause to search, and they should hold the law and kick it.
Right. It's that right, and that really goes to the other point of if there's disdain for the people that are appearing in front of a judge, it's unlikely that they're going to make a tough decision, a right decision when their position as a judge is based on popularity. And I think it's fair to say that in the world of judicial campaigning, it's not uncommon to see judges say things like, I'm going to be tough on crime, which is which plays to the public, but it's
yeah, and it sometimes doesn't work because thank goodness it didn't work for the Republican candidate for Attorney General 2 years ago. That's what I'll say. So
that's right.
I did have a question that was texted to me. Do you have any idea about any sort of recreational laws or anything that will happen or dispensaries in Grosse Pointe?
Well, each Grosse Pointe's their own. That would probably fall along the lines of why we're a municipal court, not a district court, because we're still a little old. They are still a little old in their thinking. I have not been told there's any
opting in.
Well, yeah, I don't think any of the retail areas have opted in yet. I think
okay.
a couple. I think the Grosse Pointe Shores has no retail area, so that's one of the 5 that's out already. And I believe 2 areas have opted out. But Grosse Pointe borders Detroit on Mack and Alter there, so there's plenty of opportunity.
Is there an industrial area that for example, processing or the growing of cannabis plants recreationally could be done?
I don't think there's an industrial area now.
All right.
I mean, I haven't looked at zoning for every city, but I doubt it. Commercials. I mean, we got a city in Grosse Pointe where you can't have over a 2-story building. I mean,
that's what I was going to say. All your comments as a judge, let's just be honest. There's a uniqueness about that area. I mean, it's old school. It's still still got it's retained its population, right? It
yes.
Probably got a very high tax base to live there, and people still stay and they take care of their yards. People live there year after. It's a group of people that
community.
Yeah,
it's probably I'll say this. I think they're probably 20 years behind where they should be with their commercial buildings. I mean, I'm reading a newspaper, and they're just talking about how the second liquor license was just granted 15 years ago to a certain area, and now there's probably 4 or 5 there. So it's making some forward.
But I'm saying the area you're talking, it's very unique, and it's not reflective of the rest of the state of Michigan. There's very few other cities that have existed like Grosse Pointe, and that is something that, you know, impacts, you know, the interactions with the community, like the people that come before you. Like, you know, you may be in a community where they actually, you know, like the community members are not the targets. It's the, you know what I mean? Where some communities, they're, you know, they're targeting the citizens. You know, they, like, I don't know, you know, and then people aren't afraid to call the police because they'll come out there and actually, you know, look for somebody, not arrest someone or search the house or something. You know what I mean? There's probably that kind of, so it's a completely, you live in like an oasis of how it should be. And judging that, how, no, I'm kidding. Because it's not like that the rest of the place. You go in some of these, you know, let's say more economically challenged communities, and, you know, like I mean, I'm reminded of Steve Miller, retired police officer who works in my office and is my main guy here. He, when he joined the police force, I think, where did he start at? Milan, Michigan. And he was taught, you know, there's a police academy and college before that. You know, they were talking about community policing. But he gets to Milan, and he's about to buy a condominium in Milan, and his fellow officers say, "You do not live in the community." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You do not, you know, like they want to be part of it.
Don't live in the community that you police."
Yeah, so I mean, I'm saying it's like, and I think, you know, I mean, I'm sure the police officers would like to live in the community if they do. Do they have to? Do you know anything about that? Do you have
No.
Right.
They do not.
Right. So I mean,
I don't think they have to in any city in the state of Michigan anymore.
Right, but I just thought it was interesting as a dynamic, you know, and again, I'm not including your municipality because I do think they're unique in
It's a unique situation, and maybe I'm a little naive. I don't know, but I hope that I have that hopeful eye. I have young teenage daughters, and I want this world to continue to be a better place in all aspects.
I hear you.
Do judges have to live in the same community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Judges, mayors, council people. Well, Michael, it's been great.
Thanks for hanging in. I appreciate it. I feel that my questions.
Too long since we've seen each other.
We have.
You look good despite the COVID times.
So do you, my friend. So do you. This parenting is an aging accelerant, right?
Yeah. Well, that and the COVID 10 pounds I gained. But yeah, I enjoy being on it. I'll be happy to come back and just sit around and listen because great topics and good people. So take care.
Excellent.
Thank you
Appreciate
for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you.
A court where it always seems fair to the defense attorneys.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right. So, David, we can come back to you and you're resistant obstructing if you want to try to wing it real quick. We'll play the video, comment, and then call it a night. You feeling me?
Yes, I've been waiting to hear the story.
All right, let's go, David. Let's just play the video. The
Let's
4
do
minute.
it.
Roll the tape.
Roll the tape. We're doing it live.
Doing it live.
Which one?
You're wrong.
I'm not wrong.
And you should understand.
I'm doing this number when I see you. You're intoxicated.
You can understand whatever you want. You're wrong.
What are we doing?
It's not an understanding. It's a fact.
Is this
Get
it?
the hell out of my house.
Duly noted. Your car's getting impounded. It'll be an American Tony. Good evening.
David, how many times did you watch this video?
She kicked me out.
Essentially, my client's son took the car without asking, and he crashed it. He's 16 years old. He's homeschooled. He doesn't even have a phone.
Is that who's in the car backing up right now?
No, this is the cop.
Oh.
This is the cop backing up right now.
I didn't know.
And that was her walking out of the house. And so...
Do not go walking into the road right now. You're drunk. You'll be arrested for disorderly conduct.
Can you hear it?
Do not go walking into the road right now. You'll be placed under arrest for disorderly conduct. You're going to be arrested if you come in the road.
So what's happening right now is the officer's telling
Stop for 1 second.
Go back inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's put some context. So, David, let me just. So, this is at the home of your client. The police.
Let me just give this story real quick. So, the crash happens like 5 minutes, 10-minute walk from my client's house, and the kid basically he has no phone. He crashes the car. He says a dog ran out across the street. He swerved right into a guardrail.
Is your license?
Park called Looking Glass Park. He's 16 years old. He has a license. Took the car. Supposedly, he told his mother to deliver Boy Scout wreaths that he sells to pay for his Boy Scout activities. And he leaves the scene of the accident to go home because he has no phone. He doesn't know what to do. He's 16. So he walks home for 10 minutes. He knocks on Mom's door. Mom's having an emotional talk with a friend. She's been drinking a little wine. And she says, wait, what? You left the scene of the accident? Like, you got to take this phone, get back up there right now, call the police, call the tow truck, AAA cards in the glove box, get back up there. I'll meet you up there in a minute. So she starts looking for the insurance paperwork because they just renewed the insurance last week. She digs it up on the computer. She signs in, pulls it up, goes to print. Printer's not working. Next thing she knows, she knock on the door. Meanwhile, this whole time, the officer shows up to the accident scene, and he sees a car with nobody in it. All the airbags are deployed, and looks up the car's address. Car's address is for my client's home. So he zooms over to the home. He passes the kid walking on the street, doesn't think anything of it, shows up to the house, meets my client. And at the beginning of the video, you can hear it in the normal video, but it's not showing up on the Zoom. He basically goes, "Ma'am, do you own a black Subaru?" She says, "Yes, I do." And he goes, "Can I come in and talk to you?" She says, "Come on in." He goes, "So what happened?" And she goes, "Well, apparently my son," or she goes, "Did you talk to my son?" He goes, "No." She goes, "Well, apparently my son swerved out of the way for a dog and got the car stuck." And the officer goes, "Oh, he was driving?" Like, clearly sarcastic to her. And she's like, "Yeah, I've been sitting on the phone for the last 2.5 hours. You need to go talk to my son. He's on his way up there." And the cop goes, your son, like, your son's not up there. I just got called because there's a car with all the airbags deployed and nobody's around. So at this point, my client starts freaking out a little bit. He's like, all the airbags are deployed. The car's totaled. I didn't even check Casey, my son, to see if he was okay because the son kind of minimized it, you know? So she's, of course, thinking to herself, like, what's going on? Is he okay? Why is nobody up there? Why did the officer not see him when he drove to the house? And so she starts freaking out. She goes, "You need to leave right now and go find my son." And the officer's like, "Well, I think you're driving. You're clearly highly intoxicated right now. And I think if I find out that you sent your son up there to take credit for your crash, you're going to be in big trouble." And she's like, "You're wrong. My son's on his way up there right now because he's the one driving. You need to go talk to him." And the officer goes, "Well, you're highly intoxicated right now. I think you've been drinking and driving." And she keeps telling him, "You're wrong." He goes, "I'm not wrong. I've been an officer a long time. I know a drunk person when I see one." And she goes, "No, you're wrong." And then he says it one more time. She says, "Get the hell out of my house."
Oh, yeah.
He goes, "Duly noted, your car is getting impounded. You can find it at American Towing." He walks out of the house. He walks back up to the car. That's kind of where we're at in the video. He starts backing down the driveway. She goes and gets the printer to print it real quick, gets it to print out, grabs the insurance paperwork, starts walking out the door. As she gets to the end of the driveway, the officer says, "Go back in your house. You're drunk. If you walk down the street, I'll arrest you for disorderly person." He says, "Arrest me on what charge? You just told me all the airbags are deployed. In my car, my son's up there. I'm going to check on my son." He says, "Get back in the house right now. You're drunk. If you walk, I'm arresting you for disorderly person." And she again says, "What charge? What are you talking about? I'm going to go." Eventually, she blazes by him and starts walking down the street. She says, "I'm gonna go check on my son."
Cue the
And
video.
that's kind of where we're in the video.
Roll the tape.
Don't go walking down the road. I'm telling you right now, do not go walking down the road.
I'm telling you.
Get out of the road.
Tell me on the
Got it
right
going?
part.
Get out of the road.
I am going to go find out what's going on with my car.
You're under arrest. Come here.
Yourself?
You're under arrest.
I am not.
Stop. Put your hands behind your back.
You are making
You're
it
turning
really...
this into a
I
resisting
guess,
and
David, if you can explain what's going on.
You're drunk.
So basically, he says, "You're under arrest." And she says, "What are you talking
Hold on, wait till the video's over and we'll talk about it. Wait till we stop it.
I can't hear what's going on.
Then stop.
Put your hands behind your back.
To me, my son is up
You
there
got-
with the car that you told me.
Okay. What, you can't hear the audio, Ellie?
No. Like,
It's fine. What's happening, David? So
There's a way to play the audio. Essentially what happens is he keeps trying to tell her she's drunk. He won't talk. She keeps saying, "I'm going to go see my son. You're making a mistake. Why are you fighting me? Why are you doing this?" You know?
and he says to her,
he keeps
"Get
telling
back
her
in
to
the
put her hands
house.
behind her back.
You're not allowed to leave your house." He says, "Get back in the house. You're intoxicated. I'm going to arrest you if you walk out of that house. Ma'am, don't go down there. I'm going to arrest you. You're intoxicated. I'm going to arrest you."
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much. And he says, "That's it. You're under arrest." He keeps saying, "Put your hands behind your back. You're drunk." He won't listen to her. And then at some point he says, "I'll throw you on the ground right now." And this is before he takes her up to his car. I guess you can just play it. I can narrate it.
Roll the tape.
You're drunk.
My son is up there with the car.
Put your
With all the airbags. You're turning off and going to see what's going on. This is my house. I'm walking up the road on my street. Why are you leaving?
What's the deal?
Who's it? Find out who they are. Find out who they are behind you.
Put your hands behind your back.
Find out who they are.
Put your hands behind your back. Do not make this difficult.
I am not making this difficult.
Do not make this difficult than it needs to be. I do not want to force you around and hurt you. Then put your other hand behind your back.
If you're in a fight, you fight me.
I'm not going to
I'm going to do this for the next.
Put your other hand behind your back.
You listen?
Put your other hand behind
Can
your
you
back.
listen?
I'll listen to you after you do that. Put your other hand behind your back. Put your other hand behind your back.
Step away from me and I won't.
Put your other hand behind your
Step
back.
away from me and I
I do
won't.
not want to hurt you. If I throw you
And
to the
I do
ground,
not want to hurt you. Step away from me.
I do not want to hurt you. Whoa! The tussle.
That was
The
unnecessary.
tussle.
My son is down the street and you're
My
crying.
God.
That airbags were just full.
put your
And
hand
you
behind your
won't
back.
let me go see what's going on. You are an evil.
He probably feels pretty strong right about now.
Are you kidding
But
me?
he can't even wrestle a woman.
Go back inside.
Part of the like, what's his problem?
Let's go back
Put
live.
your other hand behind your
All right, Dave.
Shoot.
We
He's
just-
Just
like,
a
"Geez,
rundown.
you made this way harder than it needed to be." Like, why he blames her the whole time.
For throwing her on the ground. She was posing no threat to him.
Fuck the police.
Yeah, FTP.
Ow.
Echo.
Echo.
Yeah, I heard myself echo there.
Justin.
So yeah, I mean, we got not guilties on both charges, luckily. Even though she's clearly resisting, he had no reason. They were basically, their theory of the case was that simply by walking down the street, because officer said he was drunk, she was drunk, with no field sobriety test, no PBT, literally just, he knows a drunk person, and she was a danger to other persons or property by simply walking down the street. It's a crazy standard. The idea would be that like a person couldn't walk, like get too drunk at the bar and say, "I'm going to walk home." Or a couple that has been drinking gets in a fight and I say, you know, one of them says, "I'm going to go walk it off and get some fresh air." That's suddenly illegal and a disorderly person simply by walking. But what really happened here is the officer didn't like that she told him to get the hell out of her house. and he wanted to show her who was boss.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he said it.
Looks like
He
it.
said, "Oh, duly noted, your vehicle's getting impounded." That was him saying, "You might be the boss in this house, but I'm the boss outside." Then he's walking down the street, and he wanted to show again he's the boss. "Get back in your house. I'm the boss out here." You know, and she says, what am I doing wrong? You know, and then he wanted to show her he's the boss when she wouldn't listen to him, so he wanted to prove his dominance again. At that point, he's arresting her. He's doubling down. You know, he knew he was wrong. He knew there's no crime there.
I just don't understand. Go ahead.
A really interesting part of the video is a little after this on the video, after they finally get her in the car, a second officer shows up, and she says, "Is this on tape?" And the other officer says, "I got nothing to hide. Of course this is on tape." And then like literally 15 seconds later, the officer says to the other cop, he goes, "What happened?" And then they both turn their mics off to talk.
Wow.
Right after he said, "I got nothing to hide." I really roasted him in front of a jury on that.
I mean, I understand why they didn't just like try to talk to the son to figure out that, yeah, he was driving, this is what happened, rather than go after the mom like all of a sudden like that.
Well,
Like,
and they
why
didn't
not
say the
tell
arrest
the
was for the
mom
drunk
where
driving.
the car was?
Well, the son, meanwhile, while this whole thing's happening, the son's back at the scene of the accident. They already determined the son was the driver because the tension on the seatbelt, when you get in a car accident where airbags deploy, the seatbelt stays in that exact position that it was. And the son's like 6'2" and skinny, and you know she's not. She's shorter and rounder, you know. And the seatbelt fit the son perfectly snug, and the seat was back for like a 6'2" person. So they had already, before he slammed her on the ground, they had already determined she wasn't the driver, and she was telling the cop the truth the whole time. But meanwhile, this cop just wanted to assert his dominance, you know. So there will be a 1983 case coming soon. Oh yeah, she's
really. You're gonna file it?
There's gonna be, and somebody's gonna be filing it. She hasn't chosen her civil attorney yet, but
she got scraped up and stuff, or what?
She was severely bruised on her knee. She had 2 toenails broken, which caused her pain walking for months. And her face was scraped. The officer shoved her face into the ground. Like on that video, you can't see the ground. He's sitting there, kneeling on knee in her bottom of her spine, and hand on the back of her head, shoving her face into the ground.
Isn't she in handcuffs on the ground? Why is that
he eventually
necessary?
Handcuffs her. And like when you look at the continuum of force from MCOLs, they say the factors to consider: 1, the severity of the crime that you're arresting the person for. In this case, the crime was he thought she was a danger by walking down the street. That's how severe, when there's no cars coming. So there's no reason to use force for that reason. 2, you're supposed to look at the size and stature of the person that's doing it versus your size and stature. Like, does this person pose a threat to you? Of course she doesn't. Whether there's weapons involved or the possibility of weapons. He admitted on the stand he had no reason to believe that there was any weapons involved. You're supposed to look at the strength of the person. You know, all these factors say there's no reason to use that force. He could have, if he really believed he was in the right, he could have, you know, called backup and just had another officer come up. It's not like she was trying to hit him. It's not like she was trying to be violent with him. I mean, it's insane. And this officer, after he knocks her on the ground, he goes, "I don't know why you made such a kerfuffle out of all of this. Like, it's her fault. Like, she's the one."
Oh, yeah, isn't that cute? Kerfuffle.
I like that word.
And I mean, the way he testified at trial, he tried to make it seem like, you know, she was just being completely unreasonable and he's the reasonable one. And of course, you know, I played the tape for him. I said, "Show me, please stop the tape." Well, actually, Josh Covert did this. He said, "Tell me to stop the tape at the point that she's being a disorderly person," you know? And he like stops it at some point, and Josh goes, "Okay, now tell me what other person is being endangered at this point." And he goes, "Well, her." But of course, the law for disorderly person is not endangering yourself. You have to endanger another person. And he goes, "Okay, what piece of property is being endangered?" "I guess nobody."
Was Josh Covert representing the same defendant or a co-defendant?
Yeah, me and Josh did the case together. It's in he's a Lansing guy. It was, 20 minutes away from him. So me and Josh did the case together. I did the opening and closing statements as well as direct examination of the client, and he did the cross-examination of the police officers. And he did a fantastic job.
One question I have is, like, this officer looks pretty young. Like, how long has he been on, like, I guess, on the force or been a
He's 8 years on the police force.
Oh, wow.
Well, like 2 years in the sheriff's department, but he was on some other police force for like 8 years.
Did he have other things going on before that? Like, had he been any incidents on his record?
No. Generally, what I really think happened for is her showing authority over him and telling him to get the hell out of her house, like hurt his ego as a police officer. That people should listen to him.
I think you're right.
When she continued to not listen to him, and even though he was in the wrong, and he knew he was in the wrong, he had jumped to conclusions. He thought she was a drunk driver. He told him to get out of the house. He knew he wasn't going to get the evidence he wanted. He was hoping to get a confession out of her. And then she pushed him, asserted her authority, and that to an officer, they can't take that, and then he just wanted to assert his dominance over her. And she was in the right, and she said, I'm going to go see my son. She was a worried mother, worried sick about her son, and what was going on with him. And she just wasn't going to listen to his bullshit, and he couldn't take it. And eventually he hit this breaking point where he had to just slam her.
You know what he could have done that would have solved the entire situation? He could have put her in the front seat of his cruiser and drove to the accident scene.
Or to where the car was.
Exactly.
You know what? The funny thing is, she thought when he showed up at her house, she thought that he was showing up to drive her up there.
Of course.
That's what she
That's
believed.
the logical thing you would think. Like, oh, gee, the police are here to get me to go to the accident scene.
That's what she thought. She thought they were being nice guys, and she just couldn't believe how this officer just started trying to arrest her, for going to see her son. It was like she just couldn't understand the situation, and they were really trying to push her into a plea deal. And it's one of those cases where I called the prosecutor after watching the video, and I said, look, I don't ask for cases to just be straight up dismissed right away the first time I talk to you that often, but there's not even a crime alleged here that she committed for this officer to arrest her. And that prosecutor's office doubled down with the cop. They said, yep, she was a danger to other people and property simply by walking. She was so drunk that she might have fallen into the road. That was their theory of the case at trial, that she might have fallen into the road and caused the car to swerve or something like that.
Gosh.
It was a crazy case.
But
the thing is, go ahead, Allie.
No, I was going to say, were these officers not in any sort of contact with each other to say, like, hey, we're back here with the car and the kid that was driving just showed up? Was that, not going on?
He was radioing multiple times, but they never seemed to tell him, like, hey, we have the kid here. Hey, we have the kid here. I don't know what the hell was going on with those officers, because they had the radios. They could have told them. But I just think this officer, even when the other officer shows up, his sergeant, and says, no, the kid was the one driving, because he goes, I think she was driving. And the other officer says, no, the kid was driving. He goes, are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure she was driving. They're like, we checked that. Like, there's no way she would have fitted that seatbelt, And he didn't want to believe it. It's like, and it's funny, earlier in the tape, he says, like, I'll check my crystal ball. I'm pretty sure it was her that was driving. He literally said that.
So pretty much he just had the idea in his head and he just didn't want to believe anything else that he would hear.
And officers, I mean, unfortunately, it's a culture thing, I think, with a lot of police officers, that they cannot take their authority being questioned. They don't know how to deal with it. And when somebody questions their authority, they want to assert their authority. And they will assert it first with orders. And if people don't listen to their orders, even if they're unlawful, they will use force. And they don't care who it is. They don't care if it's a mother worried about her son. They will assert their dominance over you. And that's what you saw in the George Floyd case. I think that's what you saw in the Jacob Blake case. I mean, it's when people don't listen to the officer's order, it's not about the fact that they're worried about a gun. It's about asserting authority. You know,
David,
don't walk away from me. I'll shoot you in the back. You know, I mean, that I think it's a problem that we're seeing with officers in general. They can't take people not listening to them.
David, I was listening to you describe what I talk about a lot, and I was kind of laughing to myself because it's almost as if you're narrating an African safari in a way, like you're describing the behavior of, like irrational, he's going to dominate. Here goes the police officer. This time of year, they're in full musk.
Yeah.
They will usually smell the urine and, take it into their nose gland, and then, but once he zones in on that, he will be dominating her and showing his dominance.
Yeah.
Picking up
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's a description of something that's just not based in, like what we would describe as thought, or what delineates us from animals, our ability to not just react, right? Their ability to stop, pause, if you're trained for such a thing, stop, pause, and not just react out of, the desire to pound your chest or dominate just to dominate or, mount somebody, you know what I mean? Like, you might be good at narrating safaris as a backup to Laura.
I'll do that as my backup plan. Well, it was a great show tonight, by the way. I really enjoyed hearing from Judge Metry, hearing your murder story, murder conviction.
Yeah.
I just want to know, one other amazing case. I don't know if you heard about what happened with Mary Chartier.
Yeah.
To Cora Innocence Project of Cooley Law School. 26 years. A man was just freed after 26 years in prison and they fought really hard. DNA evidence cleared him. And it was all based on a jailhouse snitch who got out of trouble, he got leniency in his own charges and just lied and said that this guy murdered these people. And he just did 26 years, and that law firm just did a great job saving this man's life. And just looking at the guy, I mean, it's a heart-wrenching story, but it was so heartwarming to see him at, some steakhouse with this huge T-bone steak sitting in front of him, and Mary Chartier. So another big win for the criminal defense community, and
Yeah, I saw that on the news last night, actually.
Yeah, really great story. So,
because I knew his case exoneration was coming up today. So,
David, you're a badass, and you're a badass for pointing out another badass in Lansing.
So,
it is
some big wins today.
Very good attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got another badass sitting here quietly. I think he fell asleep, but Michael.
We're shutting it down.
The man. Yep.
All
We're
right,
shutting
let's
her
shut
down.
it down, guys.
We covered a lot of material in 2.5 hours. Funny. Just kidding.
That's right.
Thanks for contributing, David, and we'll expect you back next. Ellen, same to you. Love you. And Allie, great job. And I'll see you at 7:30 tomorrow at the office, bright and early. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right.
We'll do it live.
sleep tomorrow.
That's right. We're doing it live.
We'll do it live.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. All right. Talk at you next week.
Good night, everyone.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strains and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Before you plea, call me, Attorney Michael Komorn.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as a plant, the sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation team to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
We've completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan, and nationally, and internationally, and even in Spaceland. There's an argument that we evolved from the cannabis plant. Let's just be honest, okay?
Ow! What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing?
420th episode.
If you're a connoisseur, you're going to want the good stuff. And if you want the good stuff, you're going to go for the mom and pop stuff because that's the good stuff.
It's just a real pleasure to come here and congratulate you on your 420th show, and thank you for having me on a few times over the 420.
Dr. Bud Green here. Welcome to our
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law. Komorn Law can take your case from arrest all the way from trial, appeals, and even to the Supreme Court. The team at Komorn Law has the compassion and the experience you can look to for help in your time of need. Komorn Law has over 20 years experience in criminal defense. We have accomplished numerous legislative changes through community involvement and lobbying. Our award-winning law firm has a reputation like no other for keeping overreaching government accountable and in check. We have built Komorn Law for people who need lawyers to stand up to the system, fight back and win. Once we become your lawyer, you become a part of our family. Don't settle for less, just ask our clients. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.